At 11:30 p.m., we pulled into the gas station. A man walked up to the car and called my fiancée his girlfriend. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. The digital clock on the dash glowed 11:28 as I steered our car off the empty highway toward the only gas station for miles. The night was still, the kind where even the cicadas seemed to have gone quiet. Sienna was scrolling on her phone, the glow lighting up her face, but her shoulders were tight. She had been unusually quiet on the ride back, though she blamed it on being tired. I pulled up beside the pump, killed the engine, and stretched my back. The fluorescent lights above the station buzzed faintly, and the smell of diesel mixed with stale coffee drifted across the lot. I got out, slid my card in, and started filling the tank. Out of habit, I glanced toward the convenience store, where a couple of late-night travelers shuffled in and out. That's when I noticed him. A man stood by the edge of the lot, hands in his jacket pockets, watching us. His face was sharp, pale under the lights, with eyes locked not on me, but on Sienna, still inside the car. I frowned, ready to ignore him, until he started walking straight toward us. Each step deliberate, his gaze never breaking from the passenger seat. I tightened my grip on the pump handle, ready for trouble. When he reached the car, he didn't look at me at all. He leaned slightly, peered through the glass at Sienna, and said with chilling certainty, "You didn't say you had a fiancé. What the hell are you doing here with him? You're my girlfriend." The world went dead quiet in my ears. I dropped the pump back into the holster and rounded the car so fast he actually flinched. "What did you just say?" My voice came out harsher than I expected. Finally, his eyes shifted to me, but only briefly, as if I were the intruder here. "Ask her yourself," he said. "She's been with me for months. She's mine." My blood went cold. I looked through the window at Sienna. Her phone had slipped from her hands onto her lap. Her face was white as chalk, her lips trembling, eyes darting between him and me like a cornered animal. She didn't open the door. She didn't roll down the window. She just froze. I yanked the door open. "Sienna, say something." But she didn't. The man laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Don't act like you don't know me. You were at my place 2 nights ago." I spun on him, fists clenched, forcing myself not to swing. "Prove it." He pulled out his phone with infuriating calm. A few swipes later, he held up the screen. There she was, Sienna, sitting on a couch I didn't recognize, her hair messy, wearing one of the blouses I had seen hanging in our closet. She was leaning into him, smiling, glass of wine in hand. The picture hit harder than any punch could have. My chest heaved. I looked back at her. "You're going to explain this. Right now." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes filled, but no words came. She didn't deny it. She didn't scream that it was fake. She just stared at me with the guilt of someone who had already lost. The man, Derek, as I later learned, kept talking, his voice rising now, full of betrayal. "You told me you lived alone. You told me you loved me. And now I find you here, riding with him? What the hell, Sienna?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just a fling. He thought he was in a real relationship. The gas station clerk had stepped outside, clearly nervous. 2 other travelers lingered near their cars, watching like it was a scene from a drama. I felt humiliated, exposed, as if the whole world had been let in on the joke at my expense. I turned back to her one last time. "Get out of the car." She didn't move. That was enough. I slammed the door shut, walked around to the driver's side, and got in. Without another word, I started the engine and pulled out of the lot, leaving her standing there in the passenger seat of a life I suddenly wanted no part of. But Derek wasn't done. He shouted after us, his voice echoing in the night. "She's been lying to both of us." The words chased me down the road, burning into my skull. The drive back was silent except for my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Sienna kept staring out the window, hands folded tightly in her lap, as if shrinking into herself. I kept waiting for her to speak, to explain, to deny, but she didn't. Every few seconds, I caught her reflection in the glass, pale, rigid, snake-like stillness. She wasn't crying, wasn't pleading, just calculating. That silence was worse than screaming. When we reached our apartment, I parked hard, killed the engine, and turned to her. "You've got one chance. Tell me who he is." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She grabbed her phone from her lap, clutched it tight, and finally whispered, "I don't want to talk right now." I laughed, bitter and raw. "You've been living another life, and you don't want to talk?" Her eyes hardened for the first time all night. Not guilty, not sorry, just cold. That was when the rage settled into something sharper. Not wild fury, but precision. If she wouldn't talk, I would find out myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, replaying every strange excuse, every late meeting. Every weekend she said she was helping a friend move. They weren't just oddities anymore. They were clues. I started with her purse, left carelessly by the door. Receipts, folded haphazardly. motel names, cash withdrawals, even a pharmacy bag with a prescription not under her name. Every piece pointed to something bigger. By 3 a.m., I realized Derek might not have been the only one. The gas station confrontation wasn't the end. It was the opening crack in the wall, and I could already see the whole structure ready to collapse. And I wasn't going to wait for her to confess. I was going to drag every hidden truth into the light myself. The morning after the gas station felt unreal. I had managed to close my eyes for maybe half an hour, but my body felt wired, my stomach hollow. Across the room, Sienna still lay under the covers, curled away from me, breathing evenly as if nothing had happened. That calmness wasn't human. Anyone caught in a lie like that would scramble, cry, protest. But she had just gone to bed, as if silence could erase the night. I couldn't live in silence. I needed to see for myself. Her purse was still by the door where she had dropped it. Inside, between loose coins and makeup, I found a folded motel receipt. The timestamp was exactly 2 nights before Derek swore she was with him. Check in at 7, check out before midnight. A pattern already forming. Another slip of paper revealed a restaurant bill signed with a different last name, the handwriting undeniably hers. She had practiced lies so deeply that she carried them around in plain sight. Her laptop was worse. She had tried to scrub it, but no one erases everything. In her downloads folder sat a PDF of a bank statement. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, always small enough not to raise alarms. Cash deposits on some weeks, withdrawals on others. A quiet bleed of money in and out of our lives. She wasn't just hiding another man. She was feeding a second existence. The image of Derek holding up his phone burned into me. I couldn't shake the look on his face, the betrayal that mirrored my own. If he had believed her lies so fully, then he was no rival. He was just another victim. And maybe he had more proof. By mid-morning, I tracked him down. His name was on one of the receipts. A quick search gave me his number. When I called, his voice was rough, tired. He didn't sound like someone gloating. He sounded broken. We met later in a coffee shop across town. He was already there when I arrived, hunched forward, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't waste time. He told me she had been with him for months, always claiming she lived alone, spinning him the same stories she once fed me. He slid his phone across the table, and I scrolled through the photos. There she was in his apartment, drinking wine on his couch, leaning into him with a smile I had thought belonged only to me. The timestamps were knives. The movies she said she saw with coworkers were dates with him. The nights she stayed late at the office were hours spent in his bed. Then came the worst part. Derek admitted a friend of his had gone on dates with her too, under another name entirely. She had fed him the same tale of independence, the same act of being open and vulnerable. A second man, possibly more. I drove home on autopilot, my mind a storm. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was compulsive, calculated. Each man was a new mask, a new lie to feed. That night, I checked again. The receipts, the bank transfers, the jewelry hidden in a box. None of it matched what I knew of her. Cheap trinkets I had never seen her wear. Money that left our accounts without explanation. Even the pharmacy bag with a prescription that wasn't under her name. Every piece whispered that she had entire identities hidden from me. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. If I did, she'd twist it, deny, cry, make me feel insane for connecting the dots. I wasn't going to give her that chance. I wanted a pile of truth so high she'd suffocate under it. 2 nights later, I drove to the motel listed on the receipt. I walked in, heart pounding, trying to act casual. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when I approached. I slid the receipt across, pretending I had left something behind. He glanced at it and shrugged. He remembered her. Brunette, slim, sharp eyes. She came there often. Sometimes with me, he said, sometimes with another guy. He assumed we all had some arrangement. My stomach turned. He described the other man. Tall, dark jacket, scruffy beard. Not Derek. Someone else. I left the lobby shaking. Every time I thought I had uncovered the scale of her betrayal, the ground shifted wider beneath me. Back at the apartment, she was on the couch watching television, looking almost bored. She didn't ask where I had been. She didn't bring up the gas station. She didn't bring up Derek. Her stillness terrified me more than any fight could have. I watched her from the doorway, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I loved. I saw a mask waiting to be ripped off. I sat at the kitchen table until midnight, laying everything out. The receipts, the bank statement, the photos from Derek, notes from the motel clerk. Each clue was a nail. I could see the coffin taking shape, but I wanted more. She had tells, little patterns in her behavior. Nights where she claimed she was grocery shopping but returned with nothing more than a bag of chips. Afternoons where she dressed carefully to catch up with a friend I had never met. The signs had always been there. I had been blind. So I followed her. Not every night, but enough to catch the rhythm. She left one evening in a rush, claiming she had errands. I trailed her car at a distance, headlights off when I could. She didn't head downtown or toward the motels. She drove to a quiet neighborhood, parked in the driveway of a two-story house, and walked right in like she belonged. I cut the engine and sat frozen. Through the window, I watched her scoop up a small boy who came running into her arms. He called her something I couldn't make out, but it wasn't Sienna. A man came out of the kitchen, kissed her on the cheek, wrapped an arm around her casually. My throat closed. This wasn't just an affair. She wasn't just lying to me. She had another life, complete with a family. The horror of it pressed down on me in the silence of that car. She had been juggling us, shifting between names and roles, building worlds where she was someone else entirely. The gas station had been the spark, but this was the explosion. I drove away with hands trembling on the wheel. The folder of evidence in my apartment suddenly felt small. Receipts and bank statements were nothing compared to this. She was living as two people, maybe more, and I had no idea how far the lies went. But one thing was certain now. She wasn't going to walk away from this untouched. The drive home after watching her step into that house felt like sleepwalking through a nightmare. My hands clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles burned, but nothing steadied me. That image of her carrying the boy, smiling like she belonged in that house, played on repeat in my mind. For the first time since the gas station, I realized the truth wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud, deception on a level I hadn't thought possible from the woman who had lain beside me for 2 years. When I pulled into the apartment lot, I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in the car in the dark, staring at the folder of receipts on the passenger seat. Those scraps of paper suddenly felt small compared to the weight of what I had just seen. Motel bills meant nothing if she was splitting her life in two, slipping into the role of someone's partner and even someone's mother. She was asleep when I finally went in, or pretending to be. She didn't stir when I opened the door, didn't move when I changed my clothes and sat at the table again. I studied her still form, that steady rhythm of her breath, and wondered which version of herself she was in that moment. The fiancée? The girlfriend? The suburban mother? I couldn't afford to wonder anymore. I needed paper, documents, something concrete. The next day, while she was at work, I made calls. Public record searches aren't glamorous, but they reveal more than people realize. Property deeds, rental agreements, business filings. It took hours of piecing things together, but eventually her name led me to something I wasn't ready for. She had rented an apartment across town under a different surname. The paperwork listed her as Sienna Blake, the same alias I had already seen on a restaurant bill. She had been paying for it in cash through a property manager, month after month. It wasn't furnished as a home, more like a shell, a place to disappear into when neither life could sustain her. I sat staring at the printouts, my chest tight. She had constructed not just a lie, but a framework of lies, complete with addresses and signatures. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't a single mistake. It was design. The apartment wasn't enough. I needed to know about that house. I drove back the next evening, parking farther down the street this time. I waited, my stomach twisting, until the front door opened. Sienna stepped out in jeans and a sweater, carrying a small bag. The man followed her, kissed her casually, then went back inside. She didn't look back. She drove off, and I tailed her again. But instead of going downtown, she went to a grocery store. It was as ordinary as breathing for her. That double rhythm, mother in one moment, single woman in another, left me dizzy. I couldn't let myself be dizzy. I needed names. 2 nights later, I returned to the house, this time on foot. Lights glowed in the windows. I waited until the man left in a truck, then slipped closer. The mailbox had a last name I didn't recognize, a name I would later learn belonged to Derek, though in that moment I didn't connect it. The pieces were still shuffling into place. I checked property records the next morning and confirmed it. The house wasn't hers. It belonged to him. She had embedded herself in his life the same way she had embedded herself in mine. The child wasn't hers, but the ease with which she played the role chilled me more than anything else. The more I dug, the more I realized how dangerous this was. It wasn't only about betrayal of love. It was financial. She had access to my accounts, to my credit. If she was willing to invent lies, what would stop her from leaving me ruined in the process? I printed everything. Receipts, bank transfers, property records. I filled a folder with them until it bulged. But even as I built the case, I couldn't shake the paranoia. If she was lying so smoothly to me and to Derek, how many others were there? I reached out to Derek again, this time showing him the documents. The moment he saw the rental under Blake, his face hardened. He admitted he had never known her by that name. He had thought she was free, unattached, waiting for a future. Now he realized he had been a pawn just like me. The conversation that followed was raw. 2 men trying to make sense of the same puzzle. Derek confessed she had hinted about money troubles, and he had helped her with bills once or twice. Small amounts, nothing crippling, but the pattern was there. She had been testing how much she could extract from him, just as she had siphoned from me. That was when I saw the full shape of it. She wasn't torn between love and temptation. She wasn't confused. She was feeding off us, living comfortably on the attention, the gifts, the stability. We weren't partners. We were resources. I felt something shift inside me. The rage I had been carrying since the gas station cooled into something harder, more controlled. This wasn't going to end in shouting or tears. This was going to end with precision. For the next week, I watched her carefully. I never confronted her. She came and went as usual, offering bland explanations, slipping into bed beside me with the same mechanical rhythm. But every movement of hers went into my notebook. Every lie, every gap in her timeline. One evening, she told me she was meeting a friend from college. I followed again. This time she didn't go to Derek's house. She went to the rented apartment under her alias. Through the window, I saw her alone, changing clothes, pacing the room like she was waiting for someone else. Eventually, another man arrived. Not Derek. Someone new. My jaw locked as I watched them sit together on the couch, laughing. She kissed him as if nothing in the world existed outside that small, barren space. It was then I understood the depth. She wasn't maintaining two lives. She was maintaining as many as she could manage, cycling between them, feeding off the illusion of intimacy like oxygen. I walked away before I saw more. I didn't need to. The truth was already bigger than I had imagined. Back home, I sat at the table surrounded by papers, my notebook open, the folder stuffed with evidence. I was no longer confused, no longer desperate for explanations. I had them. She had built a web of names and faces, and I had followed each thread back to its center. Now I needed to decide what to do with it. The law was an option. Fraud, deception, misuse of funds. Derek had already spoken about legal action, but a part of me wanted something more direct. Not revenge exactly, but exposure. I wanted her mask stripped in front of everyone she had deceived, so there would be no corner left to hide. The plan began to form quietly, almost naturally. I would gather Derek, maybe even the others if I could find them. I would put her in a room where she couldn't lie, couldn't switch identities, couldn't slither away. I would make her face every life she had pretended to live. For now, I waited. She still moved around the apartment as if nothing was wrong. She still kissed my cheek absently when she left for work. She still thought I was blind. But I wasn't blind anymore. I was awake. And every step she took was another step toward the trap I was building. The folder on my desk had grown thick enough that it barely closed. Receipts, bank statements, rental records, photographs from Derek, notes from the motel clerk, pages of my own observations. Each sheet was a piece of her lies pulled into the light. For a week, I added to it obsessively, sleeping little, eating less, waiting for the moment when the mask would finally come off. She still floated through our apartment as if nothing had changed. She still claimed late-night errands, still returned with excuses, still kissed my cheek absently before disappearing again. Every time she did it, I felt more detached, as if I were studying her rather than living beside her. She thought I was asleep, but I was awake. Derek and I stayed in contact. He was shaken but determined. He had given her pieces of himself, believed her lies, and he wanted to face her with the truth. I told him I was building a plan, and he agreed to stand with me when the time came. That time arrived faster than I expected. One evening, I tailed her again. She left dressed for a casual night, not glamorous, but not plain either. Instead of the suburban house or the rented apartment, she drove to another location I hadn't seen before, a small restaurant tucked away on the far side of town. Through the window, I saw her meet yet another man. Different from Derek, different from the one at the apartment. They embraced easily, like old lovers. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront her then. I only snapped the time and location into my notes. The picture was complete. She wasn't maintaining two lives. She was maintaining as many as she could juggle, slipping between them with ease, harvesting attention, money, stability. That night, when she came home, I knew what I had to do. The confrontation couldn't be in public where she could scream her way out or twist the story. It couldn't be just me where she would gaslight and cry until I doubted my own eyes. It had to be undeniable, a collapse staged so perfectly that no lie could patch it. I called Derek and told him the plan. He was hesitant at first, afraid of the storm it would unleash, but he agreed. He wanted closure as much as I did. The next evening, I set the table. Not for dinner, but for evidence. The folder sat in the middle, open, its contents spread neatly like a prosecutor's case. Derek arrived quietly, waiting in the kitchen while I prepared myself. My heart pounded with anticipation, not fear. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. When she came through the door, she looked tired, distracted. She dropped her purse on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and only then noticed me waiting. There must have been something in my expression because she stopped cold. I gestured to the table. She hesitated, then walked over. Her eyes flicked across the papers, the photographs, the receipts. For the first time since the gas station, I saw her face shift. Not fear, not sorrow, but calculation. I told her everything was in front of her. The motel bills, the bank transfers, the alias on the rental agreement, the photos from Derek's phone. I told her I had seen her at the suburban house, watched her with the child, with the man she had claimed not to know. I told her about the apartment she used as a stage for yet another relationship. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She only stood there, jaw tight, as if weighing whether to admit or to attack. Before she could speak, Derek stepped out from the kitchen. Her composure cracked then. Her eyes widened, lips parting slightly. She hadn't expected to face both of us at once. He told her he had believed everything, that she had called him her future, made him think she was building a life with him. His voice trembled with anger, but also with grief. He pointed to the photographs spread on the table and asked how she could stand in two lives without drowning. She said nothing. Silence was the only shield she had left, but silence wasn't enough anymore. I pressed further, telling her I had records of her withdrawals, her transfers, her signatures under false names. I told her this wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud, deception that carried legal weight. I told her she wasn't going to bleed me dry, wasn't going to ruin me financially the way she had tried to manipulate him. Her face hardened. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, scream, even lunge at me. But she didn't. She just looked at both of us, calculating whether there was still a path out. The answer was no. Derek spoke next. He told her he would be filing charges, that he had enough proof of financial manipulation to involve the police. I added that I would be protecting myself legally as well, cutting her off from every account, every card, every link she had to me. That was when she finally broke her silence. She tried to twist it, claiming she had been lost, confused, searching for stability. She painted herself as the victim of circumstance, a woman overwhelmed by the need for love and support. But the words rang hollow against the mountain of paper between us. I didn't answer. Neither did Derek. The lies hung in the air, dead on arrival. The sound of the front door opening startled all of us. Another man stood there, a stranger to me, but not to her. He froze at the sight of us gathered, recognition flickering in his eyes. He was there for her. It was the final collapse. She had been caught so deeply in her own cycle that her worlds had begun to collide. The confrontation unraveled into chaos then. The stranger demanded answers, Derek shouted. She tried to regain control, but it was gone. Her masks had slipped in front of everyone she had deceived, and there was no lie strong enough to stitch them back. By the end of the night, Derek left with his folder of proof, vowing to take legal action. The stranger stormed out, cursing her name. And I stood in my apartment, no longer a fiancé, no longer a fool, but a man who had finally seen the full truth. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, banks, and paperwork. I cut her from every account, secured my finances, filed my own reports. Derek followed through with his charges. Word spread quickly in her circles, the double lives exposed. She lost her jobs, her standing, the carefully balanced image she had built. I heard later that she tried to rebuild elsewhere, moving under yet another name. But the weight of the evidence followed her. The law caught up. Fraud is harder to outrun than heartbreak. For me, the silence returned, but it wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of clarity. The gas station at 11:30 p.m. had been the crack in the facade, the voice of a stranger who refused to stay quiet. From there, the lies unraveled until nothing was left but the truth. I didn't see her again. I didn't need to. I had all the answers I would ever need, and they were written not in her words, but in her actions. In the end, she wasn't the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't even one person at all. She was fragments, masks, shifting shadows. And the moment the shadows collided, she ceased to exist. I was free. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.